Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be the Combat Series episode number 162 for you guys today. And to kick off the Combat Series this week, I'll be sharing my UFC 328 main event summary between Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland. In the main event of UFC 328, you've seen Sean Strickland defeat Khamzat Chimaev by split decision to become the new middleweight champion in the main event of UFC 328. So I'll be breaking down the fight for you guys today and sharing my overall thoughts on the fight. Now, honestly, before I get to my take, I am not a Khamzat Chimaev fan, a big fan of him, nor is he my favorite fighter. And same thing can be said about Sean Strickland. But unbiased aside, I really thought Khamzat Chimaev defeated Sean Strickland 3 rounds to 2 in the main event of UFC 328. I thought it was the wrong decision to give Sean Strickland a decision rather than giving Khamzat Chimaev the decision. And other than striking, yes, it was a big mismatch in the striking department with Sean Strickland clearly outlanding Khamzat Chimaev by a landslide. But I don't know, other than the striking, what pull did Sean Strickland really have of defeating Khamzat Chimaev to win the championship in a close split decision in the main event of UFC 328? Khamzat Chimaev controlled majority of the fight. He controlled the pace of the fight. Khamzat Chimaev had 43% of advancing, landed 9 out of 13 of his takedowns, and had a total of 6 minutes of overall control time in the 5-round championship fight between himself and Sean Strickland. To my argument, Sean Strickland was fighting off the back foot, piling up a lot of jabs, and that's why the significant strikes, the margin it was so high for Sean Strickland compared to Khamzat Chimaev. Was Sean Strickland was fighting off the back foot in the octagon, piling up a lot of jabs. To anyone's argument about what I just said, Khamzat Chimaev, if you're not going to say if your argument is that Sean Strickland won the fight, and your argument to me is Khamzat Chimaev landed 9 out of 13 takedowns, what did he do with those takedowns? The same thing can be said about Sean Strickland piling up all those significant strikes. What did Sean Strickland do with those significant strikes? Did he land a knockdown? No. Did he land multiple knockdowns? No. So there's a true argument here of if you believe Khamzat won the fight or Sean Strickland won the fight. I respect both decisions, wherever you guys believe. But the 5th round of the fight, in my opinion, was really going to determine who was going to get their hand raised in the main event of UFC 328. Because I had the fight score 2-2 heading into the 5th round, and I gave the final round to Khamzat Chimaev. But 2 out of 3 judges gave the final round to Sean Strickland. That's what swung him, and that's what swung in his favor for him to walk away with the middleweight championship to close out UFC 328. But I will give Sean Strickland credit because he was a huge underdog heading into this fight, and I will give him credit for landing those jabs. The jabs were just coming home, landing home the entire fight. Khamzat Chimaev didn't have one answer for the jabs all fight long, and Sean Strickland was winning the counterpunching battle. And that's a big reason why Sean Strickland piled up those significant strikes in the fight. But Khamzat Chimaev, there was a lot of questionable things that was going on in this fight. And to me, he found his second win in the second half, but he did look tired and gassed in the second round. And you normally, sometimes you can say that about Khamzat Chimaev's fights where he does get fatigued and tired, but I've never seen Khamzat this tired and gassed in a second round of a fight, especially in his UFC career thus far, because he ended up on his back in the second round, which was very strange. It let Sean Strickland take control of him on the ground for Sean Strickland to gain ground control. And that was very awkward. And I'm thinking, was Khamzat Chimaev drained? And how much of a sacrifice did he have on his body to cut to 185 pounds once again? Now, I heard the rumors that he's supposed to go up to 205 to the light heavyweight division and not take on the Sean Strickland fight. But there's no excuses in combat sports, especially in the UFC. So my overall question for Khamzat was he drained all along? And it was very strange to see him just lie down on his back like that in the octagon because he bailed on the wrestling approach for a while. And everybody knows the bread and butter for Khamzat Chimaev, for him controlling fights, is wrestling and the grappling. That's what has made him a former world champion in the UFC. And he ended up fighting his second win in the second half of the fight, like I just said, but it was enough for the 2 out of 3 judges. And I still believe that Khamzat Chimaev truly won that fight 3 rounds to 2. But at the end of the day, it's already written in the history book. Sean Strickland is a 2-time middleweight champion. And I will give Sean Strickland credit because he is a 2-time middleweight champion, yes. But in order to be the man, you got to beat the man. In the words of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Sean Strickland defeated some of the greatest middleweight champions that we have seen in quite some time. Defeated Israel Adesanya back in 2023. One of the biggest upsets in championship history in the UFC, where he dismantled and dominated Israel Adesanya for 5 championship rounds to win the title. And then you fast forward 2026, Khamzat Chimaev, well, he was a pound, I still view him as a pound-for-pound fighter, but he was top 5 heading into this fight. And yeah, that was his first title defense, but nobody expected Sean Strickland to realistically give the problems to Khamzat Chimaev the way that he did in the striking department to win the UFC middleweight championship. So I got to give Sean Strickland credit here. He pulled off 2 big upsets to become a 2-time middleweight champion. And we might have to put Sean Strickland in the conversation, honestly, for being one of the best middleweight fighters of all time. Based off of who he's beaten to win the titles and everything that he's done at 185 thus far in his UFC career, I'm not counting that out. So will we see a rematch between Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland? Based off of what I've seen on social media over the last couple of days, Khamzat Chimaev clearly wants the rematch. I would like to see it. I think it's one of those tales of the tape where it was not Khamzat Chimaev's night. In my opinion, it was, but it just was not his night. And clearly that was not his best overall performance. Something was off, in my opinion, about Khamzat Chimaev. But I believe if they were to rematch, Khamzat Chimaev will win the rematch. But the big question is, would he be able to make the weight cut of 185 pounds again? Because you could tell, even in the weigh-ins, he looked very drained, looked like a skeleton, didn't look like himself. And it happens in combat sports. The way that people train, the way that people eat outside of training camps and combat sports, it's brutal weight cuts. It's a big sacrifice to make the weight. Some of these fighters in boxing and in MMA, they're cutting 25 pounds or more just to make the weight. So if your body has outgrown the weight, if you're Khamzat Chimaev, don't ever go back to 185, because the same thing could happen or something even worse happen to you. So if the rematch does happen, yeah, but I would want Khamzat Chimaev to be 100% and be able to make the weight cut of 185 pounds. If that's not the case, just move up to the light heavyweight division at 205 and continue your UFC career there, where he can easily, in my opinion, become a 2-division world champion in his UFC career. But I would like to see it. I think in a rematch, if Khamzat is healthy enough to make 185, he will win the rematch. In a decisive manner against Sean Strickland, clearly learning from his mistakes in the rematch. But there's something else that I want to cover before I end this segment for you guys, and that's the fight of the night, in my opinion, on the UFC 328 card, and that's the fight that took place in the co-main event between Joshua Van and Tatsuro Taira. That championship fight, in my opinion, was my favorite fight of the UFC 328 card. Now, again, fight of the night was Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. That co-main event championship fight, in my opinion, was the fight of the night at UFC 328. Fight of the night, and honestly, between these two respective fighters, heading into the 5th round, between Joshua Van and Tatsuro Taira, I had the fight scored 2-2 heading into the 5th and final round of that championship fight. Joshua Van was very battle-tested in that fight between himself and Tatsuro Taira, and his flyweight title defense, his first flyweight title defense. And Joshua Van had to overcome a lot of adversity. He was taken down several times in the fight. Tatsuro Taira had a total of 10 minutes of control time in that championship fight between himself and Joshua Van. And he made up for it. Joshua Van made up for being taken down several times with the takedowns. In the first couple of rounds, he was basically grounded due to the fact that he had no answer for Tatsuro Taira's grappling abilities. And he made up for it, winning the striking exchanges when the fight was kept standing between himself and Tatsuro Taira, because he got the better of the overall exchanges. And you expect that with Joshua Van having that overall striking background, he outlanded Tatsuro Taira 131 to 55 significant strikes in that championship fight between the two respective fighters. And in the 5th round, Joshua Van was too much for Tatsuro Taira. The power was too much for him, and he scored the knockout victory. Now, I thought that was a good stoppage. I can understand a lot of MMA fans out there voicing their opinions that they didn't like the 5th and final round stoppage where the referee jumped in and stopped the fight between Joshua Van and Tatsuro Taira. can understand your point of view if you think it's an early stoppage, but in my opinion, Tatsuro Taira was defenseless, and honestly, the stoppage could have been worse. So you always want to protect the fighter. In combat sports, whether it's MMA or boxing, you always want to protect the fighter, and hopefully they go on to live and fight another day. You don't want to see something outrageous happen in a stoppage. So I can understand why the referee stopped it. But clearly, Tatsuro Taira was pissed off. He was just already bleeding. He left his blood, sweat, and tears in that octagon, just threw out his mouthpiece, pissed off at the fact that the fight ended like that. But yeah, Joshua Van, I want to see more of him in the flyweight division. And I honestly want to see a Joshua Van versus Alexandre Pantoja rematch by the end of 2026, because everybody remembers how Alexandre Pantoja lost the flyweight championship in December, 23 to 30 seconds into the fight, due to that unfortunate injury. I don't understand still to this day why that fight was not labeled. I keep thinking labelized is the word. Labeled as a no contest, but I think that rematch will definitely be one of the biggest fights to be made in the second half of 2026. But overall, those are my thoughts on Fight of the Night at UFC 328, and that is my overall fight summary on the fight that took place in the main event of UFC 328 between Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland.